Greetings, folks. Welcome. Business climate. This has to be one of the most talked about topics related to economic development. In fact, business climate might be the first thing that comes to mind when a state or local policymaker thinks about a region's economic development. Some policymakers might talk up their region's friendly business climate, while others will argue that taxes and the cost of doing business in their region are just too high. And in a lot of discussions about economic development, business climate is used as a catch-all phrase to describe just about all aspects of a region, from its taxes and business costs to infrastructure, workforce, and even amenities. A lot of news outlets and websites collect data on regions and release rankings of the best places for doing business. For example, Forbes magazine has its best states for business with 6 categories that include just about everything. Forbes tracks business costs, so labor, energy, and taxes, regulations, labor supply, things like educational attainment, economic climate, growth prospects, and quality of life. Back when I published my book on the pursuit of economic development, the best states for business according to Forbes were North Carolina, Texas, Utah, Nebraska, and Virginia. If you fast forward a couple of years, 7 of these states in the top 10 in 2017 were still among the top 10 places for business in 2019. So these rankings are relatively consistent over time. Given the high level of importance that many policymakers place on business climate and the high level of attention that these rankings receive, it raises the question of whether the best places for business actually perform better in terms of economic development. But before we answer this question, we need to get at exactly what's being counted in business climate. That's because the Forbes rankings use measures such as employment growth, unemployment, and new business openings to rank places by business climate. Since these are actually indicators of growth and development, it's almost obvious that the top places for business, according to Forbes, will also have the highest economic performance. To get around the issue that indicators of economic development, that is, measures such as job growth and unemployment, are used in rankings of business climate, we'll look at specific business climate indicators that are related to cost and quality of life. So now the questions become, do low costs and a high quality of life lead to stronger regional economic performance? To answer these questions, we'll look at the results of a study by Jed Kolko and colleagues that analyzed the effects of business climate indices on growth. In the study, they focused on business climate factors related to taxes and costs, and then quality of life indicators. In fact, they found that places with low taxes and business costs tend to rate worse according to the productivity and quality of life indicators, and vice versa. This suggests that regions may face trade-offs between having low taxes and providing a higher quality of life. In the analysis of the effects of the business costs and quality of life indicators on regional economic growth, Kolko and colleagues found that the tax and cost index is a better predictor of state economic growth as compared to the productivity and quality of life indicator. But they warned that the role of these tax and cost policies should not be overstated. That's because other characteristics of regions, such as the types of industries in the economy, and even weather, were more important predictors of economic growth. In my book, The Pursuit of Economic Development, I calculated a business cost index that is based on taxes, labor costs, and the cost of electricity. To give you an idea of what I found, here's a list of the 10 lowest cost states as of 2010. You have South Dakota, Montana, Mississippi, Wyoming, and Nevada as the 5 lowest cost states, followed by Louisiana, South Carolina, Tennessee, Idaho, and Kentucky. As an interesting side note, I was interested in the types of regional characteristics that might influence its cost of doing business. Given the importance that a lot of policymakers place on business climate, I was particularly interested in the connection between politics and business costs. When performing this analysis, I started from the premise that the political affiliation of a state's governor may be indicative of its political climate. So I looked at the relationship between business costs and the governor's political affiliation. Here's a scatter plot that shows the relationship between my business cost index as of 2010 and the number of years between 2001 and 2010 when the state had a Republican governor. At the top of the figure, you see the states with the lowest cost of doing business, places such as South Dakota, Montana, and Mississippi. And at the bottom, you have the states with the highest cost of doing business, for example, Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York. The very flat trend line, and it's dashed to indicate that it's not a statistically significant relationship, shows that there's virtually no connection between the cost of doing business and a state's political affiliation. I have more to say about business climate and regional economic development, but you'll have to watch a second video. For now, let's end with a few key takeaways about what we just learned. First, business climate is a broad concept, but policymakers often have taxes and costs in mind. Second, research shows that low taxes and business costs help the growth of states, but this effect is overshadowed by other regional characteristics such as the types of industries in the economy and even weather. Finally, we found that there's no connection between business costs in a state and the governor's political affiliation.